Fantastic. Well, welcome. This group is the most technologically astute because you found the new link and got in. So the people that aren't in here yet, we'll just let them drip in as they catch up. My name is Ted Chandler, and it's my privilege to serve as co-chair of the RVA757 Connects. My co-chair, Tom France, and I welcome y'all to this meeting, and we're really pleased that you could join us. You have another slide for me there, John?
You're not seeing the next slide, our purpose?
There we go. So our purpose, it's very broad: to improve the economic success and quality of life along the entire I-64 innovation corridor. Our mission is that we support major opportunities that will impact missions to come. And what you should read from that is we don't play small ball. What we're focused on doing is just working on those types of major initiatives that, when we're successful, will have a lasting impact. Next. Coming up a little bit slow. There it is. So these are our priorities. When we get to our priorities, we're quite focused. Even though our purpose is broad, our focus is tight. And these are the 8 priorities for our upcoming year, for 2023. And you're going to get brief updates as to how we're doing on this. What you should know is that we're very disciplined in how we approach each of these priorities. We start with research, and we make sure that we bring the parties to the table that are going to make a difference, and we bring a real discipline to every one of our projects. Next. We have great board members, and we're going to introduce 5
Ted,
ones.
President Williams, could I just ask a question?
Certainly.
Yeah, I just noticed there are a lot of things on those priorities that say I-64. And so
Yes.
is it being new to this, is it a stretch to say that I-64 in that corridor is the centerpiece of the plan?
Yeah, I think the way to look at it is our geography is expansive from RVA, which we have flexed to pick up Petersburg, all the way down to the ocean front. And we flex that to pick up what is known as 757. So it's that entire geography. One of our marketing themes is all of the innovation and the technological development that goes on that corridor. So when we think of this, where many people don't know RVA or 757, particularly in the global marketplace that's looking at our materials, we speak to the I-64 innovation corridor. It's that entire corridor. And it encapsulates, when you look at all the great resources that we have along that corridor, that's what gave us confidence to come in and commit to this entire geography. So that's a good way to think of it, but we're not hemmed in by political subdivisions, lines drawn on a map. Is that helpful?
Very, thank you.
Good. And on this slide, just want to make a comment about the Megaregion Institutional Council. That's a mouthful, isn't it? The initials are MIC. We actually mispronounce it as Mike because we think in terms of the local groups that are really making a difference, that inform our priorities and also execute on our priorities, that they have a microphone and that we're listening. So to think about that, it's a collaboration that we have organized that goes beyond the business-led board. It is the leader of the chambers across the geography, the leadership of the community foundations that fund priorities. It is the Go Virginia leadership teams. It is the planning districts that are doing the planning for the infrastructure. It's our business roundtables. Because we're a collaboration organization, that's where we are connecting these folks in ways that they have not been connected before. And now for our new directors. Very excited to be presenting these to you today. And I'm going to do an entirely inadequate job of introducing them because time will simply not permit going through their resumes. I'll do it alphabetically, starting with Marty Barrington. Marty is the chairman of Anheuser-Busch InBev. Lest you think that means he's in charge of the brewery on I-64, well, yes, but he is the chairman of the global organization that's in 150 countries and is the brewer for the major brands. So very pleased for Marty to be bringing that relationship to us. Of course, he has done so much for our community because up until 2018, when he retired, he was the chairman and CEO of Altria, the largest public company that we have in our midst. And of course, the owner of Philip Morris USA, the largest cigarette manufacturer. One item of note on Marty's resume is he has previously served on the board of the Virginia Port Authority, which is one of our most important economic development assets in our region. Next, Don Grahl. He is the CEO of the Branch Group. They're a leading solutions provider in the construction and engineering business, over 900 professionals. And he formerly was the president of construction and connected communities for Parsons Corporation. Next, Tom McInerney. Tom is the president and CEO of Genworth Financial in the Richmond area, Fortune 500 company. Before joining that company in 2013, he was a global executive for ING. In fact, he was the chief operating officer for the insurance investment management business worldwide for that huge insurance conglomerate. Next, Shamim Mohammed. He's the executive vice president and chief information and technology officer at the automotive retailer CarMax, another Fortune 500 company in Central Virginia. He joined CarMax in 2012, and prior to doing that, he served as the vice president of information and technology for BJ's Wholesale, where he developed the company's e-commerce platform. And then Ting Zhu. Ting is simply living the American dream. She's from Shanghai, and she came to our region as a student at Old Dominion University, an international student. And thankfully, she stayed because she has built a private business, may not know it as well as you know the Fortune 500 companies that I previously mentioned, but it is a global home decor business, Evergreen Enterprises. She's the founder, chairwoman, and they provide over 10,000 home decor and a larger assortment that I'm speaking to of accessories to more than 15,000 retailers. She has done so much in our community around entrepreneurism. Entrepreneur herself, I happen to know that she is influencing many others to follow her path. One board leadership of note is she's on the board of directors of Newmarket Corporation, another large public company in Richmond. So with that, I would say that there are two characteristics that each of these directors have. First, they're strategic thinkers and accomplished in that way. But also they have a real commitment to community. The fact that they're coming onto this board and going to help us realize these large, impactful goals that we have is another common criteria for our board leadership, and each of these folks certainly have that. So now I will turn the meeting over to our secret sauce, John Martin, our CEO. He's a futurist, he's a researcher, and he is a get-her-done type leader for us. So he will be picking up the agenda at this point. John?
And Ted, did we have a chance to talk about Tom real quick with Genworth?
Did I miss Tom?
Maybe I blinked.
I think you blinked.
Okay.
Did everyone else hear me say nice things about Tom? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. It was me. So, all right. Thank you, Ted. And I just want to join everybody else in welcoming our new board members. We just couldn't do this without you. And I think the folks that have been on the board have just seen the power of us working together as one on these big projects and making them happen. So today's agenda, we're going to have just a few administrative updates from me and then get into our committee updates. And we're going to go off the share screen and just have the chairmans of the committees report out. And then I'll give a quick update on their priorities and go really fast here where we keep moving things forward, which is what we're supposed to do. But we'll quickly get to the featured topic and our speaker talking about Virginia economic development, Jason Elkubi. So we're thrilled to have him spend time with us, and we're going to have a question and answer session where we're all going to stay on the screen. We're not going to go into breakout rooms as we traditionally do. And then Tom will close us out today. So just some quick administrative updates. You know, we do have our O&D insurance in place every year, and we've got it in place for 2023. The executive committee, as you guys know, we're very active, and we now have moved to once a month meetings. We were meeting twice a week for the last 2 years, but now, or twice, you know, so the conflict of interest form, the executive committee has said that really it's for the executive committee to sign. And so all the members of the executive committee sign these and update these every year for our files. We do have all of our documents on our website. At the very bottom left-hand corner, there's a little portal. All of our foundational documents, our bylaws, our articles, all of our board meeting minutes and materials, EC minutes. We keep track of every decision made and then their financial documents. So we are, as you're going to hear from Greg, going to really move to a new website, but we'll move this portal over. So we'll always maintain our transparency. One thing we're going to do this year is we're going to update the our bios. We really would like to put together a book, a printed version of all of our trustees, as well as our MIC members. And we're going to ask for everybody to submit bios. And we're using Ted as an example here. We don't need an exhaustive bio, but just explaining who you are and the company or organization you represent, and then educational attainment in a great picture. And so if we don't hear from you sending this in, we're just going to go on your website and put something together and submit it to you. And then you can edit that. But we would like to do a digital version of this for our new website, as well as a printed version that we'll package nicely and send to everybody. The datings are set now for the rest of the year. April 26th on the Zoom meeting, 10 to noon. And then September 28th is the convergence meeting. And this is going to be a new thing for us this year. We do convergence. It's so successful. We're now going to make it part of our board meetings. And so this meeting and the April meeting and the November meeting are the separate board meetings, but at convergence, that all-day retreat where we focus on innovations from both markets and how we're working together. It's going to be held in Williamsburg, and we'll have a short board meeting as part of that. But we're encouraging everybody to come. It's now officially one of our 4 board meetings of the year. So these dates should all be on your calendar. We've sent invitations. Now we're going to move into committee updates, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And we're going to hear, starting with Ross Grogg and Chris Lloyd, we're going to hear an update on government relations. So Ross and Chris.
Sure, John, thanks. I'll start. I think Ross was tied up with other things this morning, so we'll see if he joins in. But really appreciate the chance to give everybody a brief update on kind of what's going on at the General Assembly as it relates to a number of the priorities of the group. As y'all are well aware, the session is supposed to end on Saturday. We are hopeful that that will be the case. We are still in budget negotiations, and that is, as you can imagine, the major issue to be resolved in the next couple of days. It is the rules of the General Assembly are supposed to require that members get a budget 48 hours before the final vote. So that would mean they'd have to have one tomorrow. It remains to be seen whether that will happen, but we'll certainly know more at the end of by the end of the day. Our understanding is progress is being made, but there's a large fault line and essentially relates to the governor's plan to lower taxes. The House has embraced most of those tax cuts, including a personal income tax cut, not only in the rate, but also doubling the standard deduction. But the governor had also proposed a corporate income tax rate. Together, those tax cuts reduce revenues by about $1 billion in the coming year. The House has largely agreed with those. The Senate has rejected all of those out of hand and wants to spend that money on education and mental health and other priorities. So that is the major divide in the General Assembly and what's been holding up reaching a compromise on the budget. Again, we hear that progress is being made. Whether we are able to finish by Saturday or have to go into some sort of extended session or special session remains to be seen. We'll probably know a lot more in the next 24 to 48 hours. The other fault line that does relate to one of the priorities of this group is on different approaches to mega site development. And I know Jason will be talking a lot about that later. I will put it in perspective. There is, and Jason will talk about this, I'm sure, there are differing views between the House and the Senate about approaches to spending money for site development in Virginia. The governor had proposed a concept to not only put additional money into the program that we have, which is called the Business Ready Sites Program, but also to allow the state to actively get involved in site acquisition and having money to support that. The Senate has largely rejected that site acquisition concept. Instead, has embraced legislation to require a study of that and look at best practice around the country. But still, even the Senate did provide money for the existing program. And to put it in perspective, just 5 years ago, Virginia spent a nice round figure on site acquisition, and that was this one, 0. And now we're looking at a fund where Governor Northam had started and Governor Youngkin built on it. We've got $159 million for site development. Of that, already $109 million has been spent, $19 million for Lego, and then the governor announced several weeks ago the spending of the first $90 million for that. The House and the Senate, while they are different in their approaches, still would put another $100 to $200 million into site acquisition. That's very good and very good for this region, particularly given some of the sites that were already approved in the package that the governor announced several weeks ago, including $25 million for the Upper Magnolia site in Chesterfield County. We all know about the Coastal Virginia industrial site in Chesapeake and other ones in between that could be future beneficiaries of this program. So again, Jason will lay out the business case as to why these sorts of investments are so important. But to put it in perspective, I'm sure Jason will talk about this as well, is our competitor states are also spending very heavily on this. Governor McMaster's of South Carolina announced in his State of the State address a couple of weeks ago that South Carolina is going to put $200 million into site development. North Carolina spent $330 million last year on one site for the Toyota project. Georgia has continued to invest in sites, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and other states. And so we really got quite the competition ahead around us on this. And Jason will talk about how the lack of investment historically has held Virginia back. So that is one of the major fault lines that will be sorted out through the budget conference. Going back to some of the group's priorities, as y'all will recall, last year, the General Assembly did provide general funds for the 64 gap. That was contingent upon the state's financial picture being good. Fortunately, the last fiscal year ended in a good posture. And so that money, that $150 million has been reaffirmed in the budget this year as proposed by the governor. The legislature is trying to do that method again and put some more money into 81. And I know that's not in this region, but obviously what happens on 81 has a very direct and real impact on the Port Authority. As we all know, that's where it connects a lot of the Northeast to the Southeast manufacturing core and all the manufacturing and distributions along 81 and how important that is to our ports. So while 81 wasn't a priority for this group, the idea that money is going into 81 is something that is very relevant to this to the region. With regards to the global internet hub, there is some language in both the House and Senate plans regarding prioritization of the remaining federal funds that would be used for broadband. But of course, everybody's also been paying attention to the significant announcement by Amazon several weeks ago to invest $35 billion in new data centers over the next 10 to 15 years. While most of that investment will be outside this region, it does provide for additional money to extend infrastructure. south out of the hubs in DC to get closer to this region. And Amazon Web Services decision, at least our phone's been ringing off the hook, and I'm sure others are hearing about it as well, is that's gotten a lot of other people interested in developments of data centers that could be in this region. I'll pause there. It looks like, Greg, did you have a question about that? I saw a hand raised. Oh, no, Greg Garrett.
Yeah, not specifically about that. I was really waiting until the end of your talk to just ask if you would make sure you cover the initiatives by the governor to retain our veterans as part of our workforce. That I know that deals with budget issues as well, I would guess.
Sure, it does. You're right, Greg. That is wrapped up in the tax package that the governor had. As you know, last year, the tax package did exclude retiree military income as part of the tax basis to catch up with what other states are doing to provide benefits for our veterans. There were proposals pending in the General Assembly this year that would have expanded that to other veteran income to make that at a lower tax rate or exempted entirely. That again is one of the major fault lines of the budget conference. The Senate has rejected that across the board. The House looks like they're embracing it. The governor has a number of other workforce initiatives, which I'll touch on in just a minute, that certainly do impact veterans. Jefferson Labs, as we all know, was a priority for this group. The House and the Senate have supported the governor's initiative around that, though, in different ways. It's getting into too much detail to outline how they do it. But there is support for it. The House proposal isn't probably as solid as the Senate's proposal, but at least it is moving forward. On bike paths, I know, and bike trails, that's a priority for this group. As y'all know, the governor and the legislature agreed to significant money for that last year, including money for the Fall Line Trail. This year, the House has added language to their proposal, which allocates some additional money for other trails around the Commonwealth, and specifically makes allocations to those, and then says that if there's money left over after those other trail projects have been funded, that more resources can be made available for the Fall Line Trail or any other trail that meets the eligibility criteria of the program. So that could be a potential funding source for the boat trail that we've all talked about. Going back to the workforce training issue, the governor had in his budget, and the House and the Senate generally have agreed to his proposal to support additional money for the Talent Pathways Initiative coming out of Go Virginia. That's about $24.5 million for that. The governor did have some additional money in there for the credentialing program of the community college system, as well as for the internship program at the State Council on Higher Education. We also all know that the governor has been pushing a significant legislative initiative to merge a number of Virginia's workforce training programs. That finally looks like it's overcome some of the opposition that existed from the Democrats and is moving forward. And that all those programs do have a significant veterans component to them as well. There was not movement yet, although that obviously could be an issue to be sorted out by the budget conferees for additional money for the community college system for the Higher Virginia plan. We'll have to see what happens in the next 24 to 48 hours with regards to that. And finally, the other priority of this group was supporting the state's commitment for the Lego project here in the Richmond area. And the legislation for that has been approved and is headed to the governor for final signature. John, that's a quick review. I don't know if Ross has jumped on or see if there are any other questions.
Okay. Well, Chris and Ross, if you're on, thank you so much. We are, so lucky to have you guys working for us and really volunteering your time to work for us. And you guys return my call just immediately. Every time I call, when we see an opportunity, you guys talk about it and report back. It's just amazing that we have your expertise and really your dedication. So thank you on behalf of everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, John. The only thing that I'll close, if I might close quickly, is I think what we've all talked about is, having a group that gets together in the off session to talk about priorities for next year, because this being a short session, there are a number of issues that are going to be studied in the interim. And of course, to recall that the political landscape next year, and I don't mean just a partisan landscape, just who sits in the General Assembly next year is going to be radically different because of redistricting and retirements. We could lose up to 20 members of the Senate and 40 members of the House, and just the amount of institutional knowledge that walks out the door and the need for us to talk to, people that are completely new to the legislature to hear about, one, what this group even stands for is going to be important. So I think that'll be something we'll be working on going forward. Thanks, John. Sorry, Father.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris,
All right.
can I,
Well,
John, can I ask Chris
yes.
one more question?
Please.
Chris, is there anything of these things that you've mentioned, is there anything that we need to, that you're recommending that we do to try to break the log jam on a couple of these initiatives? I mean, if a couple of people from the Democratic side of the Senate would switch their positions, there's a lot of things that look like could be accomplished.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Well, of course, their view of it is, they want to put money into education. I'm not taking sides here. It's the issue. The issue is tax cuts versus, education funding. And what I expect is going to happen is that the legislature will split the baby. And that is, I wouldn't be surprised if the final package includes an increase in the standard deduction. I think there's, for the personal income taxes, I think there's general broad bipartisan consensus around that. That has a cost of several $100 million. The corporate income tax initiative probably will not make it through. And so you'll see some money going in. So I think, urging some sort of compromise so that we do get money into education and workforce training and mental health, which I think everybody agrees is a need, while still doing something on the tax side to make Virginia more competitive. Because if you listen to the governor and his advocates, his cabinet and others talk about, Virginia's tax position compared to other states is causing some of the outmigration of talent that we have, whether that's veterans or others. And so I think if we can urge some sort of compromise that allows for the investments in mental health and education that we all want while improving Virginia's competitive position from a tax front, that's where we would want to be.
Okay, great. All right, let's move over now to Mitch Haddon. Mitch is the chair of our development committee, and it's a very active committee. So Mitch, give us an update.
Thanks, John. Good morning. So the committee met in early February, and we generally focused in two areas. First is there are a lot of renewals as it relates to our pledges coming up 23 and 24. And so we're going to need the committee to be prepared to help Laura as we go through that process of securing the renewals. So we sort of set up a process for that, got ourselves ready to be on call when Laura needs us. The second was a broader conversation on how do, what other sources of funding might be out there to support our organization and our initiatives. So we talked about, are there foundations and grants? We kind of, discussed potentials in those areas. We also talked about I think Meta is going to support the Global Internet Hub Strategic Plan report. Talked about could the community foundations help us with the ROI study on the trail, the bike walk trail. So once again, other potential areas. And we're going to keep that conversation going because there's a lot of good brainstorming. It's the first time we'd actually talked about other sources. So I think the committee left with the, sort of an action plan to keep thinking about it. And when we come back together, hopefully there'll be some other ideas on the table. We are going to, through the development committee, we're going to create a process for reaching out and thanking people individually for their pledges and their support. So the committee is going to take upon itself to, at the right time, make that personal call or personal email that actually shows our appreciation for the contributions and the support. We went off tangent a little bit and talked about the importance of a branding piece for our organization, sort of that one-page sort of card stock that really talks about, what we're all about, the accomplishments we've had, what we're planning on in the future, so that we actually have something that sort of standardizes our story and allows all of us as board members and others to speak to it in the moment. Spend a little bit of energy time talking about the Innovation Spotlight. We all believe it's a tremendous series that Greg has put together. It's providing education that's not available really anywhere in the market. We've had good attendance. We haven't necessarily had great attendance. So, we had some conversation about, is there a messaging issue? Is there do folks really know how powerful this education is and how unique it is? You just can't get it anywhere else, the stuff that we've been presenting. So that's in a nutshell what we spoke about. We are scheduled to meet again in April, and we'll keep working at it, John.
Great. Any questions for Greg? All right. Well, thank you for all your time, Mitch, and dedication to this. And all your committee members. All right, communications. Greg Gilligan, going to give us a quick update.
Sure, thanks, John. Appreciate it. As John mentioned, we're getting ready to launch our new website It'll have a clean new look to it. We hope to launch it sometime maybe in mid to late March. It's going to emphasize our initiatives. It'll have a spot there for Innovation Spotlight. It'll be a place also where we'll have information about who our board members are, as John mentioned. So look forward to that coming about sometime next month. Innovation Spotlight. We've had some, first off, we've changed from a Tuesday at noon to a Wednesday at noon this year in 2023. In addition to of having some, so in January we had our innovation spot was on the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the mega region. And then in February, we did one on Civica, which is preparing to start producing insulin products at its pharmaceutical plant in Petersburg. Both of those were good attended. In addition to those who attended, the one on the ecosystem had 69 views. We record these and they had 69 views on our YouTube channel. On the one about Civica, there were 98 views on our YouTube channel. So in addition to people coming to watching these live, people are also coming and watching them on a recording basis. Coming up in 2 weeks from, or next week, 1 week from today, on March the 1st, is a one on the computer education programs that are taking place in K through 12 in Virginia. We're talking about two different organizations. One is Code VA, which is bringing computer science education in Virginia's K through 12 schools and helping to develop programs to train teachers as well. The second program is something called GoTech, which stands for Great Opportunities in Technology and Engineering Careers. And that's expanding workforce training programs and additional schools, school districts across Virginia, including the Richmond and Hampton Roads region. In fact, GoTech got a Go Virginia grant to push those forward into the Region 4 and Region 5 areas, which is Richmond and Hampton Roads markets. April the 5th, we will look at what colleges are doing to prepare students for computer science and tech-related careers. We're going to hopefully, we'll have someone from ODU, someone from William & Mary, someone from VCU, and others maybe. On May 3rd, Ronnie Thomas from LifeNet will talk to us about what LifeNet is doing. If you're interested in attending any of these, please email me and I will give you the Zoom link so you can participate. We're looking at it, and when you get the emails from me, please forward them on to others so that they know about them as well. In terms of social media, we're spreading the word on both our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. In fact, let me just mention on our LinkedIn page last month when the Global Internet Hub Steering Committee went to the Meta Data Center out in Eastern Henrico County, we took some pictures and I posted something on there. That particular posting had more than 1,400 views to that particular posting. So people are hearing about what we're doing as well. And then hopefully, finally, later this spring, we hope to launch a newsletter in addition to what the other communications that we're doing. Any questions? That's it, John. Thank you.
Greg, thanks for all your work. I would just say, on this call, we're probably, so many plugged in people that know what's going on. In terms of innovation, that's our sweet spot with Innovation Spotlight. So any stories that you hear of, any innovations you think we should profile, please reach out to us. This is an ongoing series. And so we're looking for content as we move forward. And we're going to, at one point, have Jennifer Wakefield and Doug Smith from the Alliance and GRP on one of the innovation spotlights, really talking in detail about our economic development efforts collectively, how we're working together. Okay, let me go back to share screen. All right, thank you for that report, guys. I'm going to give you a quick update on 4 of our big signature projects and where they stand, and just make sure that you guys have the latest information. Remember, in our last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we had a great presentation of our strategic plan on how to advance rail. And so we have now strategic plans on all our major initiatives. but this is a PowerPoint document that details the situation and what we're focused on. And we had a guest speaker, JD Statler, the Executive Director of Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, and he really shared with us where Virginia's headed with DRP and his organization, the Authority. And might add, Jim Spoor is a member of the Authority. And really, we understand now to really advance rail in Hampton Roads and in Richmond, and that's not only between the two regions, but also to and from the regions. We have to get Long Bridge built, and that's a massive effort that everybody's focused on. It's expensive and it's going to take a decade, but we need to really have our focus there and to support them. And so JD has asked for support and several timed letters of support in the projects that they have assembled to really break the logjam in Northern Virginia when it comes to rail. And once that's fixed, then it's going to open up all kinds of opportunities for our mega region. And so we need to really work closely with those guys to make sure we're supporting that effort. The creation of the bike walk trails, this is another priority that the board voted on. And we have a detailed plan here as well. It's a PowerPoint and an executive summary document, again, for any of you guys that want to go back and look at the rationale and sort of the review of the situation and then what our plans are. We have these detailed out. And it's really about funding right now for the boat trail. And this is a great picture that shows, the Capitol Trail goes from Richmond to Williamsburg, then it splits off and it goes across the peninsula and then through the south side and ultimately to Virginia Beach. And so it's a funding game. It's $150 million that we need. 4 smart scale grants have been submitted, an RSTP grant. There's a current bill in the General Assembly. So about 30 million is under request right now, but we really need to change the game here. And this is something that we're going to be focused on this year to really help the Trail Alliance, which is the nonprofit that exists in Hampton Roads, but really try to ramp up gathering additional resources here. And one way to do that, as we support the Fall Line Trail, which is the Petersburg to basically Ashland, Virginia, this new trail. We want both of these trails to happen and to happen faster with our influence. $93 million was appropriated and approved and directed to VDOT. And so VDOT's standing up its trails office and it's about to hire a trails director. And they have not put any plans together at VDOT on how to spend the $93 million. And so we need to meet with that director as soon as they're appointed and really help suggest and influence to the extent possible that the Fall Line Trail and the boat trail receive some of this money. One of the things that our plan did was to really fire up the Tidewater Trails Alliance. They're actually using the plan that we put together as RVA757 Connects, and they want to have a board member, a new board member from our group. So if there's a passionate bike rider or walker or a person that's been on the Virginia Capitol Trail that really wants to see trails advance, we would love for you to raise your hand. I'd love to call them back and said, yeah, we heard you, and here's one of our members that can join your board and really be the sort of conduit back to this board on what's going on. The I-60 Gap project, and again, I just can't thank everybody enough. This really validated, I think, our value proposition as an organization. Recall the Hampton Roads region really put together a huge transportation package of $5.2 billion, which 311 million of it widened 64 from Hampton Roads to Williamsburg. And it's that 29-mile gap is the I-64 gap from Williamsburg to basically the Richmond Airport. The Virginia General Assembly, with our incredible support, timely support, allocated $470 million. You just heard the news from Chris. This is really solid. And then our Richmond Regional Transportation Authority put $100 million in. We were successful with a federal grant award that we helped VDOT with, $25 million. So we're at $595 million. VDOT has put in a smart scale application to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And by all indications, it looks like the full amount is now going to be closed, the $750 million. They haven't approved it yet, but sources say that this is looking really good. And the commissioner of VDOT is saying, we shouldn't stop there. If we get the full $750 million, construction costs have just gone up so much, we should get a little cushion. And so that cushion is underway. HRTPO is filing in late February for $45 million federal grant. They asked us for a letter. We've already sent it in and said how much we really want this project to happen to connect our two regions in a bigger way. So this is underway. And I mean underway, VDOT is moving forward. Construction, they have the request for qualifications is sent out, the request for proposals about to go out, contract award dates this fall. And the first segment, there are 3 segments, will be started and be completed by 2027. Then all the segments they're saying completed by late 2028. So VDOT is off and running with the majority of the money now already collected. So thank you guys again. I think we heard from the Secretary of Transportation at Convergence just how much he appreciated all the air cover we gave him during the budget conference discussion on how much to put towards this project. So the Global Internet Hub strategic plan, you guys know we've spent a lot of time briefing you on this. We're rounding the corner. We have one more meeting left. The steering committee is comprised of 62 leaders, really incredible array of people across business and government and the military, and just unbelievable world-class sort of committee. And we've been meeting about every month, and our process has really been intentional, and we're at this plan development stage with inputs from consultants and studies, and we're pulling it all together. These are 3 of our consultants. You could put Dr. Bob Holsworth on this list too. Really world-class experts on digital infrastructure on a global scale. And so I'm just going to give you just quick highlights of some things we're learning. We now understand what global internet hub infrastructure looks like. There are interconnection points and there are global interconnection points. And so when we really look inside these global interconnection points, we get a sense now of what is that infrastructure. And it's the combination of all of these things you see on the slide. You know, not one data center, but multiple data centers, a fiber network ring, really robust terrestrial network, reliable power, and internet exchange points are key. And then you add in the deep sea cables like we have, and you really get to a world-class digital infrastructure. So now understanding this gives us something to build for, and we're starting to map all the assets that we have in both regions that really make the next global internet hub not a city, but a mega region. And so that's what we're building towards. We're seeing this intentionality at work across the world. One of our consultants is really interviewing 15 different market leaders and talking to those people that brought intentionality to their markets to become a global internet hub. I'm going to give you one example. In Hong Kong, the deep sea cable, the subsea cable industry was saying, we just don't see the places that we can come ashore. And if you look at this picture, you can get a sense there's not a lot of property left in Hong Kong, but the data center owners got together and chipped in and bought a piece of property for the subsea cables. So they bought it and made it a neutral landing site. And that intentionality is replicated in all these markets. And we're going to share more stories with you that really inspired us to say, you know, we shouldn't just leave this up to chance. We should really influence the development of our global infrastructure here in Central Virginia, RVA757. We also, through our research partners, better understand where we stack up. I'm not going to go through the detail of this. You're going to see a lot of this coming up before our next meeting we'll share, but we get a sense of what defines a global internet hub market and where we stand. And one of the things of all the 15 markets that we really dissected, Telegeography, who really mines data, collects it and sells it on digital infrastructure, has said that our market is the fastest growing international bandwidth of the 15 markets that we've studied across the globe. So we really do have an amazing promise here. Something that has happened just since we really have started this strategic planning effort is NOVA is experiencing some headwinds, and it's creating an opportunity for us. We wish all the best for Northern Virginia, but you know, how can we really partner with them in the Commonwealth and really be the answer for keeping Virginia at the forefront of digital infrastructure? We're seeing this pushback in Northern Virginia, and with big data center developments, we're seeing actually residents come out and environmental groups and really causing a little bit of havoc for the folks in Northern Virginia. This is just a Google shot of some of the citizens marching against data centers. I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but some of the rating services or the people that show where Northern Virginia and the other internet hubs rank and rate, we're saying that Northern Virginia is no longer the #1 top 10 undisputed data center kings. And so one of the things they're pointing to is another location out on the West Coast, Hillsboro, which is in between Seattle and Portland. And boy, they have everything going for them, including a number of subsea cables. But it's really a great lesson for us when we look at the way this is structured. Everything I read about it, it just sounds like our mega region. It's 2 cities, 2 really big population centers with a smaller town in between, and being hyper connected by many of those assets that I shared earlier on those slides. So Hillsboro is starting to be the darling of the industry, and I think there's some lessons that we can learn from them on how they position themselves. The other parts of Virginia are ramping up, though, and you heard a little bit from Chris. Microsoft is expanding in Mecklenburg, and they've got a huge data center campus there. They're investing more money, and they're using their green technologies in these new facilities. Amazon Web Services announced $35 billion in Virginia data center campuses to come over the next 10 years. And so this was big news. They didn't announce exact spots or locations. And so I think that's what Chris said, his phone's ringing. But other parts of Virginia are starting to figure out, how do we work as a larger region? How can counties come together to attract data centers with a regional tax pack? Or, and some folks out in the western part of the state, how do we use their coal mines and the water that's in there and the cool temperatures that data centers need? So people are starting to think through this, and I think we'll hear from Jason in a few minutes, just how much the incentives have really paid off for Virginia, and thinking about where we go from here. So where we go from here with the Global Internet Hub Strategic Planning Committee, I'm just going to give you some considerations. These aren't approved. I can't say they're going to be in our final report, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the kind of things that we're thinking about. And again, we have these consultants, international consultants, that are helping us. And in fact, one of them, Telegeography, has said to us, ever since we started working with you, our phone's starting to ring from other regions across the globe, that people are starting to get organized from a more sort of multidisciplinary approach, not just the subsea carriers calling us or just the data center market, but regional activities from the local governments coming together with private sector. So I think we're onto something. Maybe we started a trend, I don't know. But we have to attract more subsea cables. There are going to be 10 to 12 new cables on the east coast of America, and we're in position because these big hyperscalers want to diversify where they land. And it used to just be Miami area and New York, but Hurricane Sandy taught them you got to be diversified. So Virginia is the home to 3 cables, and hopefully we can get 2 or 3 of those 10 to 12 new cables over the next 10 years if we're positioned well. One of the things that we need to do is to make sure that, because we have a busy port, that anchors don't drop on these cables. And you might say, oh, come on, it really does happen around the world. There are all these stories of cables getting broken by anchors, because most of the subsea cables go into the ports. And so we've got to figure out, what is their grid system, and where can we say this is where the cables will come, and there's no anchorage in these zones. And so the Coast Guard and the Virginia maritime industry is working on sort of a grid system. And so what we need to do is make sure that gets adopted and approved and enforced. We need to rethink data center sites. They're certified sites on Jason and his team have put together a great inventory. You heard Chris talk about all the money that's going into this. It's the kind of thinking that we're starting to see around the world on data center sites, that just not getting put on every corner, but are being really thoughtfully put in place. One is really close to home. It's up in Frederick, Maryland. It's called Quantum Loophole. And these guys have just sort of reimagined the way a data center site can be placed and also fueled. And this is right across the Potomac River. They've put in a fiber network ring that runs underneath the Potomac in 2 zones, and it loops down to Ashburn, right in the middle of Loudoun County. And so this is where Maryland's focusing a lot of attention, and just starts to make a lot of sense in terms of how they're thinking about the environment. They're calling it bees to trees, but it's really using green technology. And when we were in that metadata center for one of our meetings, it was fascinating to see the solar farm next door, and to realize that, they collect enough energy for their data center that they can put 3 times what they need back on the grid or on the grid to start with. So I think that's going to be the future. We see Microsoft leaning that way as well. Naval Air Station in Oceana is trying to get into the game, and they're saying, look, we've got a lot of greenway here. We need our runways, but we feel like we could put 1,000 acres of property into the public stream of commerce for potential data centers. And I know Doug Smith and the Alliance is doing a study on what are 10 locations for data centers in Hampton Roads. And I could go on and on about this, but I just think we need to be thinking in a big way, a strategic way about where we're going. And we need to educate people along the way. Another thing we're talking about as a group is we got to make sure all the cities and counties are aware of what this is about and what the potential return can be. And so we need to organize ourselves in this way. And then advance our tech talent pipeline. And so you got to have the workers in place. So there's a whole nother topic that our steering committee has been discussing. And, you know, we just saw a recent announcement from the Southern Methodist University, SMU. They just came up with the first major in engineering department, but for data sciences. And so I don't think we're far off from having interconnection points and understanding the infrastructure of global internet hubs as a major in the future. So all this is really exciting. We got the right group. We understand what an infrastructure plan needs to look like, and we're excited about coming back to you in the next board meeting and sharing our final recommendations and how do we drive all these factors forward. So stay tuned for that. And that concludes my report. Any quick questions before we go to Jason? Okay, well, it shouldn't be too much news to anybody. I just wanted to give you an update. We are fast approaching our deadline. And thank you to Go Virginia for helping to fund this study, and to some of the folks on the steering committee that put in some matching dollars as well. So now we're going to turn to our guest speaker, Jason Alkubi. And, you know, this is probably one person that we don't have to introduce to this group. Everybody not only knows Jason, but many of the folks on our board worked with Jason. His resume is so impressive, and I'll just leave it up here for a second while I just say, you know, it's not often when you have such an important organization to our Commonwealth, when it's time to find a new leader, a new head, there's a national search, and you know, it's rare that that national search just leads right back home to a person that's already at a place, and that's the story of Jason Alkubi. He was at VEDP, started off in July 2017, was so instrumental in so many things that Stephen led us on and that he put in place, and including the Amazon HQ pitch team. But I think when you recognize that you've got talent right there, it's just so smart to hire that talent. And that's what we did with Jason. And I think the folks that made that decision were some of the big economic development leaders, you know, Barry Duvall and of course our governor and Stephen at the port. I mean, it was just unanimous that we've got the right man right here. We don't need to go anywhere. And so thankfully we made that decision, and the rest is history. Jason is certainly leading us forward. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Jason. And Jason, I'm going to stop sharing my slides. I know you want to pull up your deck, but on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And when you finish, we'll just we'll go on with a question and answer period. And I just so appreciate all you've done for us.
Yeah, well, good morning, everybody. John, thank you for that incredibly kind and generous introduction, and for your great partnership. As I've you know, sort of gotten into this role and found my footing. As I talk to you guys today, I am now basically a year into the role of CEO, and have been just doing everything I can to not only you know, maintain the momentum of VDP that we achieved over the last 5 years or so, 5 years under Stephen's leadership, but also working really closely with partners across the Commonwealth, including those in the RVA and 757 regions, to really deepen the partnerships and begin to envision what economic development could look like and should look like in Virginia as we sort of cast our eyes on the horizon and think about what's possible in the Commonwealth. John, and I'll just tell you, I am as excited today as I have ever been, not just at VDP, but in my entire professional life. There's a lot going on. There's a lot also that we need to figure out, and so this is a really timely conversation. John Martin did a great job of kind of prepping me for this, and I'll just tell you guys, I do have a few slides, but what I'm really hoping to do is just give you kind of a few kind of bigger picture thoughts, and then maybe have a dialogue together. I think this is it's an important time for me personally, if I can be a little bit selfish, just to to think about how I can connect myself in this role more deeply to RVA757 Connects, but also to begin to engage a dialogue with the movers and shakers, if you will, of two of Virginia's most important regions. So I'd really like to sort of begin that dialogue today, and to think about how we can kind of nurture it over the course of time as we think about unlocking the great potential of the two regions that you are involved in leading, but also this great Commonwealth. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. A lot of heads nodding. So let me, I did promise a few slides, and I'll try to be brief. John Martin, how much time do we have?
We have 1 hour left in our meeting, and so it's
Okay.
all yours.
And do you have other items that you want to cover?
No, you're it.
Okay, well, great. Well, I'll try to spend far less than an hour presenting slides, and I'll leave hopefully the vast majority of the hour for an open conversation that everybody can engage in. So so just a few thoughts to frame our dialogue. One of the things that you should know is that VDP is charged by Virginia with developing a strategic plan for economic development of the Commonwealth. It's not just a VDP strategic plan, it's a total like Virginia strategic plan for economic development. And we did this for the first time, and back in 2017, we updated the plan during the pandemic to make sure that we were considering the shifts that had occurred. And both times that strategic planning process has consistently embraced and articulated 5 big goals for Virginia. These are sort of the North Stars, if you will. One is to achieve robust state growth. Virginia historically has been sort of a middling state for growth, typically somewhere in the 20s out of the 50 states in terms of percentage employment growth. We want to shift Virginia squarely into a leadership position among at least the top 5 to 10 states in America on a consistent basis. We want to do that in a way where every region of the Commonwealth participates. Obviously, some regions, including RVA and 757, are much better positioned to do that, in part because of their just size and momentum than some other places. But we want to ensure that every region of Virginia is able to participate in that progress. Doesn't mean everybody's going to grow at the same rate. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to grow in the same way, but it means that we want to try to give everybody a path to, sort of staying in positive territory from a jobs perspective. A huge part of unlocking those first 2 big goals is making Virginia a very strong state for business. And we are a good state for business. There are some things that we can do to get even better. And we have to keep in mind that our competitors are not standing still. In fact, for most of the last couple of decades, our competing states have been moving very, very aggressively to position themselves competitively, particularly a very strong state that's immediately south of us. So we've got some work to do there. Internally at VDP, we knew that we needed to do some things to become a stronger organization, to develop the capabilities to help achieve those first 3 big goals, and we've made some progress on that. And then finally, we wanted to recognize that that none of us are going to be able to pull this off alone. This is a team sport, and part of what we needed to do at VDP was to position ourselves to be a much stronger partner to to other organizations, including yours and including the EDOs in your regions, to be most effective. Part of that meant, developing the capabilities to be more relevant and more helpful, but part of it also meant, just a mindset shift to recognize that a huge part of what we needed to do every day was to think about how we could be a great partner and really live up to our name as a partnership. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but you should know that as we at VDP have pursued these goals, particularly that goal about making VDP among America's most effective and impactful state EDOs, we've added a lot of capabilities. We've improved in almost every area, and we now are an organization that is not only focused on marketing Virginia for economic development and recruiting new companies. We also, I think, as many of you know, about 2/3 of the projects that we work on and announce as VDP assisted projects are actually the expansions of existing Virginia firms, even though those don't always capture the big headlines. We've put a lot of energy into expanding our trade strategy and our trade development services. Our trade team is now helping more than 450 Virginia businesses bring their goods and services to other markets around the world every single year with very good results. A big part of our role is really to sort of coordinate among the different partners in the economic development ecosystem, and we've put some systems in place to improve that coordination. Always looking for ways to get better. Another big thing that we focused on is building the capabilities, and this is one of the most essential things, building the capabilities to be a more informed, articulate, and influential partner in terms of creating the policy environment and the strategies to improve our economic competitiveness across the state and within the different regions. In other words, if you just think about VDP as trying to sell Virginia and its regions as a product, you're missing half the story. The other part of this story, and perhaps the most important part, is actually improving the product that we're trying to market and sell. If we have a strong product, we're going to see much better results. That's where a lot of the work needs to go. We've got a strong research team. We administer a number of performance-based incentives. A huge part of where we've been building new capabilities is in the space of workforce solutions and systemic talent management. We've done that in a couple of ways. Many of you are familiar with the VGIP program, which is a grant program that we have administered for many years, basically helping expanding and new companies offset the costs of their recruitment and training services with a grant. We have complemented that with the Virginia Talent Accelerator program, an awesome fully customized solution for companies that care more about getting a world-class service than getting money as they're locating and expanding and creating jobs. And that Virginia Talent Accelerator program is already, even though it's only about 3 years old, one of the best of its kind in the country, getting great results. The other huge thing that we've done even more recently that you've probably heard less about is we're developing the capabilities within VDP through the Virginia Office of Education Economics to position Virginia to have an unparalleled understanding of the relationship between what's going on in our education and training and workforce activities and how that shows up in the labor market, how that shows up in terms of employment outcomes for the individuals that we are serving with those kinds of services. And very importantly, using those insights to unlock improvements in the connection between the supply of talent and the demand for talent. And if we can get that supply and demand relationship really kind of humming and harmonized, we're going to unlock tremendous economic potential. And then finally, as Chris alluded to a few times, we've put a lot of energy into positioning the Commonwealth to have the portfolio of project-ready sites that we need to win industrial projects. We have been getting killed in this area for many years, particularly for larger advanced manufacturing projects, because we simply did not have available. We've got a lot of catching up to do there. As excited as I am about, you know, the investments that have happened so far, and the $90 million that the governor announced invested in 21 different sites, we've got many years of catching up to do there. And so we just, you know, it is way too soon to declare victory on that front. So as we think about, the point here is that, you know, we've got a plan that I think has some worthy goals. We've done a lot to get stronger as a state, as an EDO, as a partner. And when you look at the results, we've made progress, substantial progress across all of these goals. And we should be really proud of that. But we should also recognize that we have a heck of a lot more work to do if we really want to achieve these big goals that we've laid out. And I'll tell you, I thought this second goal was going to be the hardest one, the idea of getting every region into positive territory. And, you know, indeed, it is a very challenging goal given the, you know, sort of economic outlook of some of our regions. But I'll tell you, I think in many ways, the toughest one is that first one, really getting Virginia overall to be a leading state for economic growth. As much as we've done, you know, we have only moved up modestly, and the pandemic impacts have really been kind of humbling. One statistic that kind of should keep all of us up at night is this. So if, you know, when you think about, you know, migration patterns in America since 2020, when you look at, you know, just the net domestic migration, the people that have moved, you know, within the United States across state lines, five states account for a full 2/3 of the net domestic migration gains. 5 states took 2/3 of the movement of people. 5 states took 2/3 of the movement of people. Virginia is nowhere close to being in those 5 states right now. We have lost people on net. That is really concerning in an environment where talent is going to be the single biggest determinant of economic growth. If we had the people, we could absolutely get more projects. We could absolutely fill more jobs that are open today. We could absolutely put points on the bottom line of employment growth here in Virginia. That is a huge thing that I'm thinking about 1 year into the job. As proud as I am about what we've done, I really think we've got to do a whole lot more if we want to begin to really get the flywheel turning. So, you know, as I think about this aspiration of delivering, you know, leading economic performance, we've really got to build an economic development enterprise that can position Virginia to achieve these kinds of outcomes. And I think there's a few things that we should keep in mind as we think about what it will take to do this. First of all, we're not going to be successful if it's just the economic developers that are in this game. If it's just, you know, we've got to put the shoulders of all of government into this. I mean, this has to be a priority for, you know, how we think about education, how we think about workforce, how we think about infrastructure, how we think about tax and regulatory policy. It's really got to be kind of a whole of government approach. I will also say, it is going to be essential that what we do at the state level is really well harmonized with what's happening in the different regions of Virginia, which is why this kind of dialogue is so important. And it's important, and I'll talk about this, that we have the capacity that we really need to move the needle within the different regions. Part of it, of course, is about continuing VDP's journey to be the most effective and impactful state EDO in America. That means better talent, you know, the right strategy, the right operations, and a focus on the results. And speaking of the results, we're going to need to really measure what matters here. And one of the things that I'm thinking about as I think about the future of VDP is how do we, make sure that we're actually measuring in totality the things that matter most. And I want to talk about that with you guys. This is kind of a conceptual chart, but I think it's maybe kind of the beginning of how to think about measuring performance as we think about this. Some of these challenges, some of these opportunities. The thing I would first draw your attention to is over here on the right-hand side. You know, VDP and most economic development organizations measure their performance in terms of deal excellence. You know, they're generating leads and they're trying to leads for, you know, job creating economic development projects. They're trying to improve the yield, you know, the number of leads that turn into project announcements, and everybody wants more announcements that, you know, commit jobs and capital investment. And we're trying to do a great job of providing solutions to those projects. That is a very appropriate focus for VDP and regional EDOs and local EDOs, and it should always be an important part of our focus. But I don't think it's enough. Increasingly, I'm thinking that a bigger part of how we measure our performance, and certainly a bigger part of how we should think about, you know, the overall, you know, sort of state performance in regional performance in advancing economic development is about, you know, building ecosystems, building the environment that makes it, you know, easier and more possible to unlock the kind of things that you see on the right-hand side. And that means really thinking about the sectors that we're trying to cultivate, thinking about the competitiveness of our product, you know, the talent, the infrastructure, the connectivity, what's happening in startups, you know, what we're doing to support homegrown companies to become, you know, bigger and healthier and to turn into anchors. It's not only something that will produce an environment that will enable, you know, sort of greater deal making, if you will, if you think about economic development as a project or transaction game. But if we build strong ecosystems, we're going to create all kinds of organic employment growth. And I think of this as kind of a virtuous cycle where, you know, ecosystem building leads to, you know, certainly better deal flow and better deal performance. But I think when you look at the bottom line of economic performance, actual employment growth, I think what you're going to see is there's going to be all sorts of growth that that a strong ecosystems produce that never even shows up in the traditional economic development pipeline. So as I think about kind of the future, where we should go, this is kind of a model that I'm beginning to contemplate, discussing with the state's leadership, discussing with my board. You know, obviously there's a big question about, you know, how exactly do you implement this, but I think this is something that we should all begin to think about. Certainly, I want to return to that when we open up the dialogue. Just a couple of quick things to add on the. I think Chris Lloyd covered most of this, and we've touched on it. I just, the legislation to implement some of the major economic development announcements that were made over the last year have, those are moving through the session with strong bipartisan support. There's several big things. That are kind of hanging in the balance, and Chris touched on those. I won't touch on those again. I will just spend a minute on site development. One, I'll just recognize just how extraordinary our progress has been on this in the last couple of years. I mean, John Reinhardt, who was on the VDP board a few years ago, will remember when we were, just begging the General Assembly to, help us go from $500,000 a year to $5 million a year, which then seems like, just a giant leap. And indeed it was a giant leap. But with the 150 million that was put in the biennium budget a year ago, 109 million of that spent already. Now both chambers of the General Assembly proposing $300 million over the biennium to advance our progress in site development. This is just enormous, and I'll just say, as enormous as it is, we also, again, need to just recognize that we have many years of catching up to do in this area. Chris made the important points here, but we should celebrate this, and we should certainly thank the General Assembly for their support. But we should remind them that this is like the new normal. This is not like one-time catch-up money. This is what we need to be doing on a permanent basis if we want to stay in this game. A huge part of what we need to do. We need to develop certainly a portfolio of sites that can accommodate a wide range of project types and develop those sites in partnership with localities and the regions. I will tell you the place where we have really been getting crushed is with very large advanced manufacturing projects. These are projects that typically require sites that are larger than 250 acres. Many of them require sites that are larger than 500 or even 1,000 acres, mega sites, if you will. Somebody's going to ask me if what's the definition of a mega site, and there's really not like a clean cut definition, but in general, we have a dearth of very large sites. We have two large sites that are basically project ready today. One is the Southern Virginia mega site at Berry Hill. The other is the Maymac site at near Emporia. Those sites are both substantially project ready today. Those sites are also, in places where they're not, close to a large population center, or as close as we'd like them to be. If we had large sites close to a large population center, we would be winning really big deals on a regular basis. That is a huge constraint for Virginia. It's also a huge constraint across America, by the way. If we can get large sites developed in proximity of metro areas like Richmond and Hampton Roads, we will have a tremendous amount of success. The trouble is that once if you ask the question, well, what do we have in the pipeline? The mega sites that we know of within Virginia's larger metro areas, including Richmond and Hampton Roads, are many, many years from being ready. Even if we put our full force into developing them, it's going to take several years to get those sites ready. That includes the Coastal Virginia Commerce Park in Chesapeake, as well as the Upper Magnolia Green site in Chesterfield County. So we need to be looking for the next developable mega site, because there's just not enough in the pipeline right now. And that's a big part of why the governor and some members of the General Assembly have embraced this idea of putting the state in greater control of searching for, owning, and developing property. Let's talk a little bit about data centers for a second. I know this is something that you guys have been thinking a lot about. I won't spend a lot of time here, but I do just want to make a couple important points as you think about the concept of developing a global internet hub. First of all, what you're looking at here is just what happened back in 2016 when Virginia extended the data center retail sales and use tax exemption program to 2035. So basically, set kind of a long horizon. We saw data center activity ramp up very considerably when Virginia extended the sunset. The challenge now is it's 2023, and we have not dealt with addressing the sunset. So data center companies are getting nervous about that 2035 sunset. And by the way, I'm not going to try to cast a vision for the global internet hub, because John has done that already, and I know I won't spend my time there. But I do want to just talk about this really important point. So around this particular program that is going to be essential to unlocking the potential that you guys see in the global internet hub. So VEDP has done a lot of work in the last year. We haven't released it yet. I think some of you have been briefed on this, but we've done a lot of work to really understand the kind of economics of the data center industry and the economics of this sales and use tax exemption in particular. I want to just first of all say we've got a really solid understanding of this now, and it's going to get better and better over time as we collect more data over the years. But I would say already we have a very solid understanding of this, and what it shows kind of in the headline is that this is just a win-win-win. This industry is a big win for Virginia. It's a big win for the communities that host the digital infrastructure, and it's certainly a great win for the many thousands of Virginians that are that depend on this sector for employment. It's said that data centers and digital infrastructure are not job creators, and there's a little bit of truth to that, but it's mostly a misleading statement. And the truth is that when you look at the ratio of employment to CapEx, it's a pretty small ratio. But when you look at what this industry employs, I mean, 13,000 people are employed directly by this industry today, When you consider, sort of the multiplier effects, you're talking about 45,000 jobs that are supported by this industry. So to say that it doesn't create jobs is a very misleading falsehood. I will also say that there's this impression that the data center sales and use tax program at the state level is just kind of giving away money. I will tell you that all of the evidence suggests that this is revenue that the state would not collect in any scenario. And what I mean by that is that 90% plus, and this has been demonstrated by many academic studies, including a study that JLARC themselves did. They show that 90+% of the data center investment would not be happening without the sales and use tax exemption, which is to say that this is the price of entry if Virginia wants to be in this business. If you do not have the data center retail sales and use tax exemption, you're not going to get the investment in the vast majority of cases. And so giving up the revenue that you get from, and it's not even giving it up. I mean, it's revenue that you wouldn't have unless the data, it's like this theoretical thing. So anyway, and I will just say that it is, to me, the evidence is very clear that we need to be thinking about extending this data center sales and use tax exemption in Virginia as we get closer to this 2035 sunset. This is a map showing, which states have favorable tax treatment for qualifying data centers. And you can see that, doing this is not uncommon. I mean, this is really kind of a feature of the tax code that's baked in. Just as we exempt manufacturing machinery investments from sales and use tax, so do we exempt data center equipment purchases. It's a feature of the tax code. Many of these states have longer time horizons for their for this kind of beneficial tax treatment than Virginia does, and so I think that not addressing this sunset soon is something that we would do at our own peril for an industry that is really win-win-win. I'm sharing all of this with you really just to give you kind of a preview of what this report is going to say. I think when we get ready to roll out this report after the General Assembly session, I think it's going to be really important that we work together to sort of, get these points across, especially considering the likely turnover that we're going to see in the General Assembly with a lot of new members, kind of learning, sort of the, kind of the, just learning about the different issues that they're going to be confronting as leaders in the General Assembly. I'm going to conclude on this slide, and then we can open it up for dialogue. One of the things I just want to say is that the role that you guys play in organizations like this and others is just incredibly important. John asked me to talk about a few things that we could do to strengthen and align our efforts, and I want to talk about those. I would just say, as important as it is to have great collaboration between RVA and the 757, I would say just make sure that as I look at both of these regions, we're going to need incredibly strong business-led capacity in the greater Richmond area and in Hampton Roads to be successful. When I look at organizations like the Greater Richmond Partnership, I'm not as familiar with the chamber benchmarks, but they're absolutely important too. When you look at the Greater Richmond Partnership, when you look at the Hampton Roads Alliance, both of those organizations have done a lot to get better under your leadership and under the leadership of Jen and Doug over the last several years, and that should be applauded. But when you look at what other regions are doing, and I don't mean other regions for Virginia, I mean other regions that we're competing with every day, the Charlottes, the Raleighs, the Atlantas, on a per capita basis, in many cases, they are outgunning us. And that means, more staff, more marketing, more sophistication, able to move faster, able to accelerate initiatives. It's really strong that we, really important that as we think about where we go, that we continue to build really strong business-led capacity and alignment in both regions. And there's certainly, as much as we've done there's certainly more that we could do and more that we should do. I want to, do what I can to champion that. we were talking about, the importance of talent earlier. I will just say, like, the more, and just talking with John Martin about, your role as kind of accelerating good things and putting business leadership behind making important strategic things happen faster. It is just so important that we accelerate quality of life initiatives that position the RVA and 757 regions as magnets and retainers of talent. You guys have focused on passenger rail, you focused on major trails. Both of those are very, very appropriate. I would just say, like, set the bar really, really high here for, the people who are involved in, creating great places for talent when it comes to housing, when it comes to making downtowns awesome. I mean, I just think, like, we should be thinking about how do we achieve, like, absolutely world-class city and regional planning and execution in these two incredibly important regions. I mean, if we can't get Richmond and Hampton roads humming, and somebody earlier was talking about how, I think it was John was talking about some of the headwinds in Nova. If we can't get Richmond and Hampton roads really just humming, I mean, more than humming, like just crushing it, it is hard to see how we're going to achieve these big goals for Virginia overall. I will also say that the vision that you guys have for the Global Internet Hub and other efforts, I mean, let's think about those as part of an ecosystem that can really generate employment growth in knowledge work. Thinking about business services, financial services, software, cyber, knowledge work, even though we're not seeing it packaged up in as many job creating projects as we used to. There's been a pronounced shift towards industrial, particularly since COVID. Nevertheless, those knowledge work jobs are going to be the largest potential job growth engine for Virginia over the next 10 years and beyond. So we've got to create places, we've got to create the kinds of ecosystems where we can really win in knowledge work. That is absolutely essential. I will also say a final thing, and I didn't want to overload you with ideas, but 4 big thoughts here. As the CEO of VDP, I now have the tremendous pleasure and ability and opportunity to serve on the Port of Virginia's board, and I'm increasingly bought into this idea that we really need to do a lot of work to establish strong freight corridor ecosystems, not just between Richmond and Hampton roads, but I'm increasingly thinking about kind of a circuit that goes down I-95. Think about that Maymax site that I mentioned earlier, back to the port along 460 and 58. We have an incredible port, but we have not done enough work to build the ecosystem to support the activity around the port. That includes site development, but it includes, providing all of the places where, the freight needs to move once it comes in through the port before it goes out through the port. Obviously, the inland port effort that's happening at the state level is a piece of that, but this is another place where I think we could just put a ton of energy and where we have a ton of room to improve and a ton of potential that we can unlock if we manage this opportunity correctly. So I'm gonna pause there, if that's okay. Show you some pretty pictures. That's my team member Stephanie Harder put a lot of work into creating these. Some beautiful photography from your 2 regions. And I'm going to stop. And I think if I'm correct, we still have about a half an hour to have some open dialogue, and that to me is the most important part here.
Boy, Jason, thank you so much. And we'll just sort of open it up. And I know some of you guys have texted me already, but John Reinhardt, why don't you start, and then we'll go to a few others.
Yeah, thank you, John. Jason, congratulations. Happy anniversary on 1 year of leadership. And as we did way back when, putting you, the head of BDP, on the Port of Virginia board and the head of the Port of Virginia on your board, it really shows that collaboration and that potential to increase and really move forward quickly. And that's what I think is helping us send the message to the legislature, because we're speaking as one voice oftentimes. So just wanted to congratulate you and your team on the great work you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing, and say keep doing it.
Yeah, John, it's so good to see you. Thank you for your partnership over many years, and especially for being a great mentor to me.
Great. How about Bill Downey? You want to go next?
Thanks, John. Hey, Jason, appreciate your presentation. As we have conversations with the General Assembly about the budget here in the next 24, 48 hours, obviously site is a big economic development issue, but we were talking earlier about the net migration How often does that come up in your conversations with, businesses and, the tax rate, business tax rate, as well as individual tax rate? How often does that come up?
I would say I think I'll address those separately. So on the migration, it doesn't always come up directly, but I do think businesses are aware of it. I mean, they are, if a business is looking at making a location decision, particularly if it's sort of a greenfield decision, I mean, they are looking very carefully at the places that are attracting talent. In fact, if you talk to some site selectors about their experiences in places like, Austin and Nashville, those are not necessarily places where it's like, where government is bending over backwards to make it easy for a business to locate, but they're still attracting tons of investment because that's where the people are going. So I think the migration issue is very much on the minds of, and it's not just the migration, it's, do we have the people in place, and, are there enough people? Are they, do they have the right skills? Is it the right sort of supply and demand match? They're looking at that, but I think the certainly they're looking at trends. They're looking at, in addition to the workforce that's there today, they're looking at the talent pipelines that are available, and they're looking at, where people are moving. And if you're bleeding people, it is really it's really a huge disadvantage. And I think it is, and this talent question, Bill, is it is, always at the top of always among the issues at the top of the list, and it's very frequently number one. It is a heck of a big issue, and I think the migration piece is just part of how it gets rendered, but it's an important piece. On the taxes, it varies, but I will say that it is a factor. It's a factor, especially for industrial projects that tend to be very sensitive on taxes. But I will also say that, when you think about economic development, I think there's a temptation to focus on sort of corporate tax rates, because that's where sort of the larger corporate entities would get taxed. But I actually think personal tax rates are even more important, because that's how the business decision makers get taxed, And so I do think both are really, really important. And I think part of it, and Virginia has a, I would say, we don't have a crazy, like, uncompetitive tax rate, but it has been a long time since Virginia has done anything to signal in terms of its tax policy that it wants to get more competitive. And we are in a super competitive neighborhood. I mean, remember, the best states in the country are like our neighbors when it comes to economic development. North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia. I mean, we are in a super competitive neighborhood. Most of those states have done things to make themselves more competitive from its tax standpoint, and they've got a great story to tell. So I think it is important, but I think part of it is also just kind of telling this story about, like, hey, we know this is important to you, and we're doing something to get better on this for you. Virginia doesn't have a story to tell right now, and all of our neighbors, I say all of our neighbors, many of our neighbors do. And remember, we've also got some competitors like Texas and Florida that are advertising no personal income tax. That is a hell of a big statement, and people who make money know what that means.
Okay. All right. So why don't we go with Ronnie, and then Peggy, and then Shaman. So Ronnie.
Yes, Jason, great work, you and your team. This is terrific.
Thanks,
just
Ronnie.
want to go to specifics. We look at talent development, and I know there's acute awareness about that. A lot of us are feeling the effects of not having talent readily available. But one of the things that we see is the infrastructure. For example, in the life sciences, we don't have a viable airport. People have, for a 1-hour journey to do a business meeting, we have to spend a day, and our guests have to spend a day. So real specific, not just broad strokes. Is there any thought, I know this is a little bit a federal question, but would you consider some of the site development money going to an airport that can be identified with Virginia, not the Washington airports?
Yeah. So to answer the specific question, I think we are quite limited in the sort of parameters of that site money. So I guess theoretically it could go to an airport that had some land that it wanted to develop for industrial purposes. So let's say that there was you could imagine like some scenario where there was something being produced, a semiconductor, for example, that needed to get on an airplane and get delivered somewhere else in the world. But I would say for most airport related applications, the site money doesn't work. Now, on a broader level, air services are incredibly important. And when you think about these sort of quality of life factors, what can we do to make Richmond and Hampton roads more competitive to business? Air service is essential. It is a heck of a big deal. When we think about what it takes to cultivate knowledge work, I mean, that should be absolutely on the agenda in a prominent way. It is not an easy thing to solve because so much of getting more direct air service is just about demand and having just a population size and a demand level that justifies it. However, there certainly are some things that you can do, with incentives to attract more air service. But I think the primary thing that we can do is we need to grow. I mean, growth will get us more direct air service.
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate. Just to jump in, I have a contrarian view. When we look at the data centers, I see that as a short term. 13,000 jobs is good, but it's just a step. So if we don't have the infrastructure, you're going to miss out on a lot of the non-data centers like the life sciences and the talent attraction. So I know it's not an easy job or task, but I think we kind of have to look at it in even a more broader sense, because I think the data centers are a short-term development. We will grab anything we can get, but
yeah. And Ronnie, just to be sure, I mean, I think I agree with you. I'm not making the claim that data centers are going to be like the primary unlock to employment growth. I do think, but I also think it's false to say that they're not job creators. I think one of the great benefits of data centers is they're massive revenue generators, both for state government and for local government, and provide many of the resources we're going to need to invest in the other things that will provide the kinds of infrastructure and the kinds of quality of life assets that we need to be successful in other industries, including the one that you just mentioned.
True. Thank you.
So I think we agree. I see a lot of hands up, by the way, John.
Yeah, we got to go to Peggy next.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jason. And I have to say that about every other word out of everybody's mouth so far I've heard today, and this is talent accelerator, talent retention, talent migration, talent out migration, talent. And so, and Jason, by the way, was on the selection committee for our new chancellor. And so he knows firsthand how important we put workforce development in the selection of our new chancellor. And he is dedicated to that. However, my question is, and we've had great success in some of our rural colleges with the talent accelerator, and we've gone in and worked with companies and developed courses and delivered training. The community colleges have been grossly underfunded for years and years and years. And just to give you an example, you just mentioned about Texas. Texas this year is giving their community colleges $650 million over and above the $428 million that they'd already allotted. So when you have site development and you have these mega sites and you're looking for talent, when that consideration comes in, will you include the colleges? And certainly I'm speaking for community colleges, but a part of that site development money and site development attraction has to be making sure that the local colleges have the equipment, the modern labs, the equipment that that new company needs to train. We don't have it now. The General Assembly is likely not going to fund us to get that equipment. We're going to have to rely on businesses and business development, economic development to help us be as modern as these companies that we're trying to attract. So will you include that money for that assistance as you are recruiting and developing and wooing companies to come to Virginia?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. One is it's a little on the sites money. It's a little bit like the airports where, you know, the sites money is for site development, not for airports, not for community colleges. So we can't do it with that money. I will also just say that as we think about, you know, what it takes to win in talent, the role of the community colleges is absolutely essential. I think I don't know that you're saying this, Peggy, but like, I just want to make sure when I say talent, I mean, I'm talking about, you know, talent of all kinds, including the kinds that the community colleges produce. You're closer to the numbers than I am, but I'll just say that getting the community college in position to be, you know, a strong driver of economic growth is absolutely essential. I'm thrilled that we have a new leader there that, you know, is going to be a tremendous partner on that front. And I think it's going to be critical that the community colleges have, you know, the resources they need to deliver, you know, what it's going to take for Virginia to be successful and each of the regions to be successful. Part of that means, you know, making sure that they're able to produce the things where there's currently a gap between supply and demand. And there are many, as you know.
Well, and we also know that 75% or more of the community college graduates stay in Virginia.
Yes.
And there are probably not that many four-year colleges that can say that. So we have homegrown talent. In some cases, we need to encourage people to come to rural areas. That is an issue of trying to get people there, but once we get them there, they stay. So
thanks, Peggy. Let's go to Shaman now. I think you're still on mute. All right, why are you?
It's not mute on my side.
There you go. We hear you now.
Yeah, it was unmute all this time. But in any case, good morning. Thank you, Jason, for a great discussion and a lot of good information. So, and Peggy, I'm gonna make a comment on talent. That's also important to me. So I have the opportunity to live in different parts of the world and many parts of the country. So I lived in, and I moved here from Boston about 10 years ago. I lived in Dallas, I lived in Chicago, and many places. What I'll tell you is, Richmond is this whole area, Richmond, you know, the Virginia Beach, the RVA757 area is an awesome place to live. And I don't think when we're talking about talent, and I'm particularly talking about digital talent, the technology talent, the people that we need to basically build the future. This area doesn't become, it doesn't even immediately become a top choice for them. Now, I have had success importing talent from different parts of the country to Richmond and this area, but when I talk to the people or candidates, and I make a lot of trips to Silicon Valley and other parts of the country where the technology talent are concentrating, whether it's Dallas or Austin or you know, different parts of Silicon Valley or Seattle, they don't think about Richmond as a place. So question for you, Jason, is what are some of the things we could be doing? Because I know we have a lot of improvements we need to do from quality of life and infrastructure, other things, but we already have a lot of great aspects in this area that are important to this type of digital talent that we can attract them with and bring them to this area and help solve. And this is a ripple effect, right? So it's a momentum. You bring few, they'll bring some more, they'll bring some more. And before you know, 10 years from now, this could become the next Silicon Valley. So I'm just curious to hear your perspective of some of the things we could be doing even to promote the things we already have.
Yeah, well, I will first of all say that this is a question I'd really like to engage in a deep way with you and other business leaders in this space. And if you or others, at CarMax would like to, maybe, be part of like an advisory council on how we do this, like I would really welcome that. I mean, that's part of what I'm thinking. Like we're going to have to, inform, our efforts here with a certain amount of ground truth with the companies that are, trying to attract and retain talent in the areas that we really need. So I would just, I'll give you an answer, but let me just say, like, I know this is not a complete answer, but one thing that comes to mind is when you look at all of the capabilities of Virginia in tech combined, and this importantly includes Northern Virginia, we have one of the largest pools and largest concentrations of tech talent in America, mostly because of Northern Virginia. And so we really need to brand Virginia, and we've tried to do this, but we're shouting through a tin can attached to a string right now because our marketing budget is tiny compared to we need to shout through a microphone. Did we lose Shaman? Oh, no, you just moved on my screen. We need to be shouting. We need to tell this story of Virginia as America's East Coast tech hub. We need to brand Virginia that way, as America's East Coast tech hub, and put that message through a big microphone. And I think what happens is if we brand Virginia that way, even though Richmond is, if you're in Silicon Valley, you're going to see Richmond or in Hampton Roads as these smaller markets, right? But if you see Virginia as the East Coast tech hub, I think Richmond and Hampton Roads really benefit from that. I think another important thing is the talent pipelines. When VDP, working with our partners in Northern Virginia, was recruiting, at the beginning with working with the Richmond region and Hampton Roads, but ultimately, when Northern Virginia was down selected, the biggest thing that we did to as part of our proposal for that deal was to institute something called the Tech Talent Investment Program, which was a commitment by Virginia to double the production of bachelor's and master's degrees in computer science and related fields over the next 20 years. So we are implementing that. We are ahead of schedule in producing tech talent. As big of a deal as that is, we really need to think about doubling down on it. There's still a gap. I mean, we've doubled it, and there's still a gap. So I think part of it is like, doing even more just to produce tech talent in Virginia across all regions, all public institutions, and maybe there's some things that we could do on the private side as well. And I think I would just say finally, we've got to create the ecosystem and make this an awesome place to live and do that kind of work. Yep. And so it kind of gets back to these quality of life things. I mean, just making, Richmond, Hampton Roads, Northern Virginia, Charlottesville. I mean, these need to be places that, they're, awesome from a livability standpoint. And I love living here, so I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, like, the competition here is really fierce, and we're going to need to, as we grow, we're just going to need to keep making these places better and better and better for talent. And part of that is like, creating like, not just places where you have like the personal amenities, but where you've got, kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and there's that buzz factor, and anyway, so I think of it as all three. I think, partly like we need to recognize that Virginia wide, there's a story to tell, but we need to be shouting that story through a megaphone, and there's a fact base to back it up. Richmond and Hampton Roads benefit from that. We need to invest like crazy in the talent pipeline. And we need to make, particularly our major regions, awesome, so that it's, easier to get people here and keep them here. Beyond that, you're going to have to tell me.
And you can think of us as a great sounding board for this and working with you.
Yes, totally.
Let's as we're talking about talent, let's move to Sean Avery, who was responsible for a lot of talent development in Hampton Roads, and then we'll go to Greg.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason. Sean. Hey, Jason. It's good to see you.
Yeah, same.
speaking of those stories to tell, I mean, I know you've got a little bit of marketing, but we do got a lot of great things going on. And how do we get that word out? How do we get it to you? I mean, Doug knows a lot about it, Doug Smith in our region, but how do we get it to you? For example, you probably don't even know, but we've got almost $50 million we're investing through the Workforce Council in the maritime pipeline, and we're going to replicate that to tech and healthcare, and we're doing veterans retention in the area. You know, I think it's known in Hampton Roads, but how do we get that information to you? Is it through Doug? Is it through John? Or do we go just send you these things?
Yeah, I would say there's no wrong door. That's the first thing. I mean, that's one thing I try to tell everybody. I mean, you know, anybody can send any, I mean, I want everybody at VDP to know, you know, anybody can send us anything, and they can send it to anybody at VDP, and it's going to get to the right place. That's the most important thing you should know. So don't worry too much about bureaucracy. Just get it to us, and we'll make sure it's sent to the right place. But I would say, as important as it is for us to know those stories, like if we can't tell the story, and like, look, I mean, Virginia spends, for economic development purposes, this excludes tourism. For economic development purposes, we spend about $2.7 million per year. Now, I don't know if that sounds like a lot of money to you guys, but like many of our competitors are doing well beyond 10 million. I mean, we've got states that are doing $40 and $50 million per year marketing for economic development, just marketing, you know, third-party advertising. And like, you know, Shauna, you know, I love you as a partner, and you do a great job of collaborating. But like, when I've got 2.7 million and the guy I'm competing with has 40 or 50 million, you know, even if our stories are better, like the other stories are going to get across louder. I mean, that's just the reality. So, yeah, we're getting smoked right now on that front. So keep sending us this stuff, but until we get this marketing thing fixed, I think you know, we're going to be operating with one hand tied behind our back.
And Jason, I know a little bit about what Jennifer has to suffer through, as well as Doug.
Yeah,
they're not making up the difference in marketing. There's tiny little budgets for both the Alliance.
Yes.
Partnership. So
Totally.
that's a big issue.
Let's
go to Greg.
issue.
Greg, real quick.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note. I started this call on Alcohol Alley in Nelly's Ford, west of Charlottesville, when I'm entering Williamsburg. I'm about to enter Williamsburg on my way to Virginia Beach. I just thought it's interesting.
Yeah.
But what I want to ask a 20-year question and a 2-day question. What do we need to do to get serious about being an example for the rest of our nation on immigration? Immigration started here. Immigration needs to expand here. We can talk about workforce all we want, but if we don't get incredibly serious about doubling, tripling, quadrupling, 10xing our immigration into Virginia, and Senator Warner and Senator Kane are both interested in doing that. There's some, they believe that they've at least indicated to me that there seems to be some chance of Washington doing something and coming up with some compromises that would connect with the immigration solutions based on merit, not based on the lottery system, but based on merit. So that's the 20-year question, that in terms of what we're going to do, what are we doing to really get serious about immigration and veterans in terms of keeping the veterans that we have. I talk to veterans every single week. Constantly, they're saying, I'm leaving to go to South Carolina, Texas, and Florida. Some of them, North Carolina, Florida, and Texas. It's unbelievable how many veterans that are leaving the workforce, the veterans force, the armed services, that are here in Virginia, that like Virginia. Their kids are in our schools, they're doing well, they're flourishing, and they're leaving. But the immediate question is, what do you need us to do to influence our collective voices in the next couple of days in Richmond to not continue to push off things that are this close, but we're not there yet in terms of what's going on in the Senate?
Yeah. Thanks for the easy questions, Greg. So I will just say, I think about the immigration thing in two parts. I mean, one is, I think until our Congress can kind of align on a sensible immigration solution, it's going to be, hard to actually expand the sort of opportunity pie of immigration as a source of talent. And obviously there's a logjam there. I do think the graying of America and the tightness of our labor market is likely to, kind of force a political movement on that. Surprised it hasn't happened already. But I would say in the meantime, in the absence of congressional action, I think the biggest thing we could do is to, consider the ways and implement the ways that our communities can be really, welcoming and hospitable to immigrants and their families. And this is an area where Virginia already does relatively well. I mean, part of the reason why things are not sort of worse in an environment where we're losing the out migration battle domestically is because Virginia is still a destination for many immigrant families. So to the extent that there is a in the absence of a sort of a federal solution, there is sort of an immigrant pipeline to compete for. We're doing reasonably well today. I think part of that is because of our proximity to the nation's capital, for sure. But I think part of it is because of the things that are happening within many communities across Virginia to be welcoming places to immigrants where they can find employment and so forth. Obviously that's kind of a big picture answer. That's on the veteran side, it's not. I could kind of try to answer that question. I suspect that. Well, I'll just say two things. Probably the most important thing to say is that. I don't know if he's still on the call. Sean Avery, are you still on? But anyway, I'm certain that Sean Avery can give a better answer to that question than me. But and I'll just recognize that. But I would say I think part of it is like, doing things for the veteran exiting population that are really meaningful. And I think, and where it's not just, oh, we like you, but we're going to show we like you in ways that are very tangible. I think what the governor has proposed and what has been embraced by by the General Assembly about, exempting, more of the veterans' retirement benefits from, state income tax. I think that's a very meaningful thing, and something that can be marketed. But I think the bigger question, well, not the bigger question, another really important question is, just how do we get in front of that pipeline and make sure that we're doing everything possible to capture it efficiently. I don't really know the answer to that, but I do think that there are some others who are in this dialogue, including Sean Avery, who would be able to give a pretty thoughtful answer to that question.
Okay. All right. Jason, I don't see any other hands up, and we really are at the end of our time. On behalf of everyone, thank you so much. You really are capitalizing the P in partnership, and really appreciate you spending so much time with us. And as you and I talked, you said, listen, we need to get together on a more frequent basis. Yeah. We really need to help do everything we can to help you advance Virginia and our region.
Yeah, well, we're in it together, and that's something I would, I truly would like a regular dialogue with you guys. And I think there's different ways to do that, but let's make sure we're doing this at least a couple times a year, so that we don't lose track of these bigger issues.
Great. Okay. Terrific. All right. We're going to close out with Tom Franz, our co-chair, and want to thank everybody for staying with us and for all the support you give us. So Tom, can you close us out, please?
Sure, John. Jason, thank you. That was very informative and energizing. More importantly, thanks for all you've done within a year. While I know the numbers are against us right now, and have been, my sense is we're doing a lot. You're doing a lot. Others are doing a lot, and the numbers are going to start changing. And like anything, it takes a little while for that to build. So I'd keep positive and I'd keep moving forward. I particularly liked your remarks about the need to build ecosystems. I think the Global Internet Hub presents such an opportunity because of the amount of knowledge-based jobs like finance, like analytics, like et cetera, that would like to be in a global internet hub. And I think with the quality of life we have between Richmond and Hampton Roads, we're going to see some of that. We've really seen it with the port, as you pointed out. And once we invested in the densification of the port and started to see bigger ships coming, more happening, what we really realized is we moved from Hampton Roads being a cul-de-sac to Hampton Roads being a gateway, and together with Richmond being a gateway literally to the world. And that combination of things, the cable landings here and the gateway, the densification of the port, to me, those improvements in connectivity, and then Virginia's embracing of the need to do collaborative things, VEDP's leadership in collaborative things, Go Virginia's leadership in collaborative things. When we saw collaboration grow and we saw connectivity improved in a couple of improved key connectivity methods, then we saw the whole thing starting to turn. And we are seeing more and more positive things, I think, start to happen. And to that note, what I'd like to ask everybody on this call is that remember, these decisions are made company by company. And so many of us are on boards and chief executives of big companies that are vital to what Virginia is doing. And as we have decisions, the more we exercise those decisions with a slight Richmond Hampton Roads bias, the better we're all going to do down the road. I mean, I for one, I happen to be on the board of an unmanned company that just made a decision to build a flight academy testing and training center and to increase its tech talent between Richmond and Hampton Roads, which increases the likelihood that there's going to be an industry cluster gather around that and what's happening at Huntington Ingalls with underwater unmanned and what's happening at Wallops Island, et cetera. So again, it all comes down to company by company decisions, but the more that we as leaders are attuned to that, and the more that we think about that as we make our decisions, our strategic decisions, the more we're going to actually help those numbers continue to turn. And once you get 100 here, 100 there, but then pretty soon you start to get some real numbers. So thanks again. I think your leadership is absolutely right at this critical time, and I think we're going to be able to do a lot of great things together. I would like to also add my congratulations to Shaman and Don and Tom and Marty and Ting for your addition to our board and for joining us. You all are icons of industry and RVA757, and we look forward to working with you in the ongoing years. And remember what we've been saying, that the better we work together to build Richmond and Hampton Roads and the turf in between, that's not going to stop at the western boundary of Richmond. That's going to run all the way out to the I-81 corridor, all the way up 95 and down 95. So we are really a centerpiece of a better envisioned Virginia. And together, what we've clearly seen is we're stronger as two regions together than we are individually. And if we keep at it, I think 10 years from now, we're going to have Jason be able to report on just astounding in-migration, out-migration numbers. So on that note, thank you all for your attention and thank you for being part of us, and let's go make some things happen.
Great. Good day, everyone. Thank you. Adjourned.